Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. On today's show, we're looking down beneath our feet. We're spending the hour inspecting Nashville's foundation. We're going underground. Maybe you take for granted that we stand on solid ground, or that what happens underground makes life possible and more livable up here on the surface. But there is a lot to appreciate down there. We'll explore the network of tunnels beneath downtown and the pipes that connect us all, really. But we will start with the geology of it all. So I have a brother-in-law who's an oil and gas geologist in Texas, and rarely do you appreciate how the earth is always changing until you go to the mountains or you go to the lake or really go anywhere with a geologist. People who study the makeup of planet Earth have a keen sense for watching how it changes. It's taken millions of years to get where we are, so even slight changes year to year are worth noting, and that's why it caught our eye that Nashville was on this list of nearly 30 cities included in a study published in the journal Nature Cities, cities that are sinking. Some are sinking much faster than others, and we'll talk about that, but Nashville's still settling at a rate that's worth considering, about 1 millimeter per year. Virginia Tech geophysicist Manucher Shirzai is one of the study's authors and is joining us now to talk about his work this hour. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on the line from Virginia Tech. So in preparing for this episode, I learned the word subsidence. Can you teach us what this term really means?
So in simple word, land subsidence means lowering of the land elevation for different reasons. So some of the reasons are natural and some of them are caused by humans.
So you know, if I'm thinking about sinking, what are those? What are the natural reasons that we're sinking?
So one main reason that is natural is due to something we call glacial isostatic adjustment. The northern part of the America was covered by a thick layer of ice about 15,000 years ago that melted. Since then, Canada is rising at a rate of almost a centimeter per year. And in perimeter of that, which is mostly northern part of the United States and east coast of the states, lands are subsiding at a rate of 1 to 3 millimeters. So other natural processes include tectonic activities such as earthquakes, but also compaction of the sediment along the coast. These are processes that we consider natural.
So what are some of the man-made causes of subsidence we should consider?
So there is a long list of man-made activities, but top of the list is always extraction of the fluid. Oil and gas, but also groundwater, make the top of the list in terms of rate and also how widespread it is.
Well, would that explain why, it's really cities in Texas that seem to be, going down faster than others? Houston, Fort Worth, Dallas?
Absolutely. You may pointed out very correctly. So in Texas, we see the fastest rate of land subsidence, and that is a combination of the human activity, which is mainly extraction of the fluid, oil and gas and water, but also in Houston area, we have some tectonic activities that contribute additional natural component to what human causes in terms of land subsidence.
And just a note to listeners, we'll have a link to that study on the post for this show, so people can investigate as many of us have done. But how do you conduct a study that reveals changes in the surface of the Earth? It seems quite challenging to notice the land sinking by mere millimeters. You know, it seems like we're always moving the ground some way. I mean, even just stepping on it would maybe move it a millimeter. So yeah, how do you measure this over the course of years?
We at Virginia Tech pioneered a very modern technology called interferometric synthetic aperture radar that uses radar satellites that fly around the Earth, transmit radar signal. This signal hits the ground and bounces back to the satellite. And by collecting this measurement over the time during the different visits of the satellites, we can create time series of the phase change in the line of sight of the satellite. In other words, we can measure how much land moves toward the satellite or away from satellite at a very high precision. We are talking about the precision of 1 millimeter per year or better. And these measurements can be created over a very large area, or hundreds of kilometers by hundreds of kilometers, at a pixel size that has a 20-meter size. So this is revolutionary technology that enabled us to produce this data at this scale and this accuracy across major cities in United.
So the study suggests that in terms of Nashville, it's glacial isostatic adjustment that you were referring to that's the primary cause of subsidence in the Nashville area. So does that mean that it's not really caused by human activity in our area?
So what we detect is that widespread land subsidence across Nashville is driven by glacial isostatic adjustment. However, there are very localized pockets of land subsidence, particularly in the perimeter of the city, that may or may not be caused by human activities. To answer that question, we need to do further analysis and follow-up studies, which includes underground examination of the sites that we see those rates happen.
What can you tell by looking underground?
So basically, we want to see if there is any facilities that drive. So for example, there is any well that extracts groundwater, or if there is any large building that is weight causes compaction of the shallow sediment, or there is any other activity such as mining that causes the land to subside above it at the surface.
You know, it strikes me that, Memphis, you talked about aquifers being a key component and draining aquifers being a key component and whether a city might be sinking a bit. Memphis to our west, about 3 hours, is famously pulls all their drinking water from a big aquifer under them. Nashville, much less so. And I noticed that Memphis is actually on your list as a city that's one of the few that you all looked at that's actually rising a little bit. I was about to ask if there's a simple explanation. I'm sure it's not simple. But is there any explanation you could offer for how you could have these two cities? You would expect one would be sinking and one might not.
So some of that uplift that we see, particularly we see that also in California, south of LA, Orange County, those are a reflection of the local policies in conserving water and replenishing aquifer systems. That's correct, that in the past decades, groundwater has been used in almost every town, every city in the United States. But some of them decided that we change the policy, we use more of the surface water, and we use excess groundwater to replenish aquifer. This is called managed aquifer recharge, and is proven to be extremely successful approach in replenishing aquifers, storing water when we have too much of it for when we don't have during the drought, and also mitigating land subsidence, and in some cases, recovering the land elevation.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Virginia Tech geophysicist Manucher Shirzai. His team published a study in the journal Nature Cities about major U.S. cities that are sinking, including Nashville. I would like you to stay with us, if you would, Professor Shirzai, but I want to bring in another guest, a geotechnical engineer, formerly with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers here in Nashville. Michael Zakola was chief of the Civil Design Branch. Thank you for joining This is Nashville.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So the Corps of Engineers is very focused on dams and levees and things, built to last for generations. In fact, there's one of your levees out here. We're based in Metro Center, so we've got a long levee that I think you all built and even made a little taller after the 2010 floods here. So you're thinking about structures that last for generations. But how big of a consideration is subsidence when it comes to designing and maintaining things like dams and levees here in Middle Tennessee?
Well, subsidence or settlement is always a design consideration for our projects, our dams and levees and things of that nature. We do investigations, site-specific investigations to try to determine how much settlement may occur due to the loading of those structures over time, and take that into account when we come up with the design heights of those structures. In addition, because the prediction of flood heights is not an exact science, there's a lot of difficulty in predicting 1,000-year and 5,000-year floods, various design floods that may be used. We add freeboard or additional height to our structures, levees, and dams to accommodate that. So it's something you are aware of, you take into account, and we have certainly done that for the dams and levees that we've designed.
I do wonder when we're having this kind of more technical conversation about subsidence, if there are people who, I don't know, homeowners in Middle Tennessee who are just thinking, oh, this just sounds like sort of settlement that we have, why my house has a little crack over here or there. Is there a difference between subsidence and what the word you kind of use there, settlement?
Well, the subsidence that Dr. Shirzai is talking about is more of a widespread phenomenon, I think, that he's looking at. We do have more localized problems here in the geology around Nashville and Middle Tennessee because of the limestone bedrock that we sit on is subject to forming caves and solution features. And we do have a lot of problems in this area because of those that can cause settlement to structures. I think you're probably aware of the problem that occurred at the Corvette Museum up in Bowling Green, Kentucky a few years ago due to catastrophic settlement of a large sinkhole that was underneath that structure.
Yeah, for those who don't remember that little bit of news, I think there were a couple of antique Corvettes that basically got swallowed up by, I assume it was part of the extensive mammoth cave that's underneath so much of Kentucky. But right there in the middle of the museum, which I think they preserved to some degree. But yes, go on.
Yes, they did. There's still some Corvettes down in the hole that you can look at. But you can drive around parts of Nashville and Middle Tennessee, and you can look at houses. Sometimes you'll see houses where the mortar has been refilled, cracking in the bricks and that sort of thing, where the foundations have settled. And that is typically due to what we call the karst geology and the limestone here. And we also have a problem due to the clays that are derived from the weathering of that limestone. They can be, depending on the mineralogy, they can be highly plastic. And when we get dry times or maybe a drought, like we've gone through the last couple of years, those clays will tend to dry out and desiccate. And when some clays are susceptible to shrinking when they dry out. And that can cause some of the problems that you see due to settlement or subsidence. Likewise, when there's really wet times, those clays will swell, and you can actually get a little bit of heave in the ground,
wow,
which can also cause problems.
Well, I'm guessing we're heaving right now. I do wonder, we're talking about aquifers a little bit, and frankly, here in Middle Tennessee, at least, I don't think of aquifers all that much. I know there are wells, and I imagine there are farms that pull from them, but how closely does the Corps of Engineers monitor groundwater like that? I kind of think of the Corps, which you were with for so long, mostly being involved in water that's above ground.
Well, we do, but we are involved in groundwater monitoring quite a bit because the nature, the level of the groundwater can affect the foundation of the structure, and which you may have to do to take that into account, and also for dewatering, where you're building something down in the ground. Like for example, a basement of a house. If you've got high groundwater, you can get water into that excavation and into that basement. But you are correct. Most of our drinking water, municipal water, comes from surface sources, the lakes and rivers that we have around here. The type of groundwater use that Dr. Shirzai is talking about would be like out in Oklahoma, where they've really overpumped the Ogallala aquifer out there, for example, where they're pumping large volumes of water for various municipal uses. So we don't have that kind of groundwater use around here. It would be very localized and certainly not of the magnitude.
And aside from subsidence, what are some of the biggest geological factors, if that's the right way to think of it, that affect big structures that are built around Middle Tennessee? I mean, are we talking earthquakes would be a bigger concern, even though we don't have big ones often at all?
Well, actually, Middle Tennessee, the Nashville area in particular, the The biggest earthquake threat we have closest to us is the New Madrid Fault up around St. Louis in that area. But it's not really that much of a threat to Middle Tennessee because of the geology. The motions would be attenuated by the time they get here, but they are a big problem for the Memphis area, St. Louis area, up and down the Mississippi River because of the nearness to that fault, the magnitude of the ground motions, and the nature of that soil, which is silty sands, silty fine sands, which are very liquefiable. When you shake them, they will actually liquefy and lose their internal strength. And if you have a structure sitting on that kind of soil, it would collapse.
Professor Shears, I want to come back to you for a second. In talking about subsidence, geophysicists have known about this phenomenon for a long time. I may not have, but but geophysicists have. So your study, although also includes some remedies or solutions, which seems like what makes it a bit novel. So I guess I really wonder, as we're talking about things moving a millimeter or two per year and not being overly concerned, how much effort are you asking people to put into, doing something about this sinking phenomenon?
Yes. So as you mentioned, land subsidence is not a new phenomenon. So we have case studies that go back to a century ago or even longer. So, and we have been monitoring land subsidence in different locations in the country, but also globally for a while. And we were aware of this ongoing problem. The good thing about our study is that, as you pointed out, shows that rates are slow. So they are steady, but slow. It means that at this moment, we don't anticipate any immediate threat to any of the infrastructures or any of the cities or buildings, roads. However, if no decision, no remedy is taken, no action is taken to slow down land subsidence or mitigate it entirely, in a decade or two, we may face some consequences. Damage to linear structures, roads, bridges, railways, pipelines, etc. So the advantage of this study is that we propose also some solution to deal with it. So it includes, a collaboration between policymakers, scientists, and stakeholders to co-produce knowledge, find solutions that work for everybody in terms of finances, in terms of economy, but also they are applicable. The stakeholders are willing to take those solutions and implement them. One solution that I really like and I advocate for is the managed aquifer recharge. In many cities, we notice that majority of the land subsidence, localized land subsidence, is due to extraction of the fluids and compaction of the aquifer. So managed aquifer recharge allows us to collect water when we have too much of it. For example, in the wet season that we have excess fluids, excess water on the surface, we can treat that minimally and inject it under the ground. Through this process, we preserve the water for whenever we don't have it. Droughts are coming in many places around the country. And then through this replenishment of the aquifer, we gradually slow down the land subsidence. And we have cases such as Orange County in California that successfully land elevation has been ceased and land is rising to compensate for the land loss that happened over the past century.
Well, Professor Shearzai from Virginia Tech, we appreciate you talking us through this study and what it means that Nashville is sinking, and teaching us about subsidence. Also, Michael Ziccola, formerly with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you so much for joining us, to both of you. We're going to take a short break. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to stay beneath the surface. We'll explore the network of tunnels underground here under Nashville and a bit beyond. Stay with us. This is Nashville Underground.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org. Funding for This is Nashville comes from Burr and Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Well, welcome back. We started the hour with a bit of news on Nashville sinking, albeit very gradually. We'll continue our subterranean show with a little side chat about the city's network of underground tunnels built many years ago beneath downtown, although some of them are newer. They were meant primarily for heating and cooling some of the biggest buildings in town. And here with us in studio to talk more about it is Metro Council at-large member Olivia Hill. Thanks for joining the program.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, Councilmember Hill is also an engineer who worked in utilities primarily at Vanderbilt for most of your career, correct?
Well, I was in the Navy for 10 years, started as a diesel mechanic, and then I was a jet engine mechanic for 6 years, and I got out of the Navy and started working at Vanderbilt.
So as part of your council duties, you also chair the advisory board over this network of tunnels known as the District Energy System. So we'll go there first. Vanderbilt has its own tunnel story that I want to get to. But can you take us down into the District Energy System for a moment? Are we crawling through this thing or are we walking?
Oh, you're walking. It's an 8.5 rock board tunnel directly through the limestone, and you have chill water on supply and return on one side, and your steam and condensate on the other side, and you walk right through the middle of it.
So we're talking, feels like a cave or like a hallway?
Well, it's a round tunnel, and it's just it's 8.5 foot tall.
Are there people down there regularly, or is it just as needed?
Well, they do regular inspections, so people go down there and walk the tunnels to check and look for leaks, any intrusion of water, groundwater, and things like that. So there's people down there on a pretty regular basis.
Like every day?
I don't know if it's every day, but it's pretty regular.
So is it hot or cold down there?
It's medium.
Okay,
it's
because
like,
you got steam and you got chilled water.
Yeah, but as long as the insulation is good on steam, none of the heat from the steam line is getting into the tunnel. So you basically have just ground temperature, which is around 65 to 70.
So cave-like temperatures.
Yeah.
So are we wet or dry down there?
Well, you have a little bit of groundwater, so you've got maybe an inch and a half of water that's on the ground that you're kind of walking around.
So how far down?
I'm not sure on this tunnel exactly how far down it is. I know all the Vanderbilt tunnels and all the depths and everything on those.
We'll get to the specifics on those, but let's say we're above the ground, which you might be more familiar with. Can you pick a landmark downtown and then take us underground and sort of where the District Energy System really is underneath?
Well, one of the tunnels just starts down towards close to the river and comes all the way under Broadway and goes all the way up past the convention and up to around Hume Fog.
Okay.
And then turns and goes towards the Capitol up that way. So.
And are there tunnels splitting off of it throughout, or is it primarily just sort of up and a turn, and that's most of it, and people just are tying into it there?
Yeah, and some of them are just lines that have tied into it. Some of them are that goes directly under a building, and so there's a small, say, a 12-foot or a 12-inch bore hole that goes from the building into the top of the tunnel, and they tap and run lines through it that way.
How old is this system?
The tunnels were built 50 years ago.
And if you were building a downtown today, would somebody build tunnels like that to connect them with these big, steam pipes?
Well, yes, but it's what I was just talking about. It seems funny back in the day how much we did building dams and tunnels and things like that, and it would be a large undertaking financially to do something like that now.
Yeah. Well, I guess was that just the technology that steam was primarily the way you were gonna heat and maybe even cool a building?
Well, it's a good way to get buildings out of the way and get steam to them out of the way, and the rock that the tunnel goes through determines the depth, because you go as far as down as you need to go to get into good rock. In some areas you have, you've got some dirt and some cracks and some areas not so, you get some shale, and so what you end up doing is you go far enough down that you have good solid rock the entire way, and sometimes that's 30 or 40 feet, and sometimes it's 120.
Well, I think that would surprise people, that you want to get into the rock and instead of avoiding the rock. Why?
Well, the rock is a support system, and so it's round, and so it works like an arch, but it's an arch in all 360 degrees, and so it's supported all the way around.
So when you're looking at the skyline, let's say, are most of those buildings tied into this tunnel system? Like, is it a requirement, or is it just all those that are along this one little right angle there of?
Well, in my opinion, it should be a requirement, but
really?
It is not.
It's not.
It's a kind of a checkbox when you go through and you're building a new building and you talk to codes and they ask if you've talked to DES and find out if you want to tie in as a system. But as a new system, when you tie into the district energy, then you got chill water supply in return, and you have steam chill water, or steam supply in return. You don't have to worry about cooling towers on the roof. And, Nashville loves to have their roof parties and their things like that. So you do away with all the cooling tower and all the other things that you have to have on your roof because you're getting it all from District Energy. And then you leave the space that you were going to use for your boilers and your chillers to use for storage or other areas. And so it frees up a lot of stuff.
Where is the steam and the chilled water being created?
Right next to the Ascend Amphitheater.
The place where the old steam plant was and burned down.
Well,
right?
It used to be, where the amphitheater is where the old garbage plant used to be.
But it's still created there. I actually can't picture where it is. But
well, take
your word for it.
It's a very beautiful brick building, and if you've driven by it a million times, you would never know it was a steam plant. But it's actually just a fake facade. The plant is inside of that. And the windows are fake. The roof is open, and the way it's designed is just wonderful.
This could be a Curious Nashville segment over here. When you say steam, can you kind of clarify what you mean there? I mean, are we talking like pressurized steam that's created by burning something else?
Yeah. So they use natural gas to heat water in the boilers. And then it heats up to 125 psi, 400 degrees superheat, and then it's sent out that way.
Is it seen as an efficient way to heat and cool like that? Or is this older technology to some degree?
It is older technology, but it still works because it's a very reliable technology. Because you take water and you heat it up to steam. Once it heats up to steam, it expands 1,600 times of what it used to be. And then so you have a lot more volume. That's why steam engines were so good, and they didn't have a lot of horsepower, but they had an awful lot of torque, so they could do a lot more work. And then that medium can just be reused because you clean the water up, you run through filtration, you add your chemicals in there, you send it out in steam, and then once it's used, it condenses back to water. It comes back, and you send it back through the system again, and it keeps reusing. And all you have to replace is any leaks you've got that happened in the system.
So is there more renewable potential there? I mean, is there some kind of geothermal you could tap into that could replace some of the natural gas that's being used there?
Well, I mean, there's ways you could look at geothermal, and you could maybe cool some of the water down to a certain temperature and use that and replace some of the cooling towers. But the expense of that is pretty high.
Well, if you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Blake Farmer. We're focused on Nashville's underground this hour. Right now, talking with at-large council member Olivia Hill, who is also an engineer by trade. Can you take us for a second to the place you do know best? I think I'm a little surprised to learn that the tunneling under Vanderbilt's campus is quite as extensive as it is. But give us a tour there.
Oh, wow. So I worked at Vanderbilt almost 30 years, and I have that crazy place memorized in my head. It's 330 acres. There's 27 miles of steam line underground. You can start at the plant and get to just about every single building underground and then find your way back.
So similar size tunnels to the district energy system?
Some of the newer tunnels are 8.5 rock board tunnel, but some of the old original tunnel that was put in the 20s because the plant was built in 1926 are 6-foot square tunnels. And what they did is they dug down and they poured concrete, and then they put a cap on top of it, and then they just covered up. So it's just under grade, maybe 2 or 3 feet or so under the grass.
I see. But many of the tunnels sounds like are far deeper than that.
Yes.
How far?
Well, the furthest one is the Children's Hospital Tunnel. It's 125 feet down at the farthest end, down by the practice facility.
Okay. So by the Children's Hospital, 125 feet down, there's a tunnel that's connecting it to all of the steam that's going around campus. Why does it need to be so deep?
To get into good rock, and again,
Really?
they do the rock studies, and so what they do is they do a core sample, and they drill down so many feet until they hit good rock. They do that about every 100, 150 feet, and then they do a map of where the best elevation is to have good solid rock the entire way.
Are they used for similar reasons as the district energy system downtown, just basically to keep all the utilities underground there?
Yes, and the same machine that dug the tunnels at Vanderbilt is the same machine that dug the tunnel for Nashville for DES.
The literal same machine?
The same exact machine.
Was it the same time period, 50 years ago or so?
No, the Peabody campus tunnel was was built in 1986 when Vanderbilt bought Peabody, and they decided to shut the steam plant down on the Peabody campus, but they had to get a way to get steam over there and electricity, and so they did a rock-bored tunnel under 21st Avenue and tied in over there, and then shut the steam plant down over there.
So these tunnels, are they, again, if you were building a campus today, would one build a kind of tunnel system like this, or is this kind of just how you modernize an older campus?
A lot of campuses would. If you've ever been on campus and notice how beautiful Vanderbilt campus is, there are no above ground power lines. Every single utility is run underground. So all the water, sewer, storm drains, power, cable, internet, everything is run in underground. And
is it just about aesthetics?
It's about aesthetics, but it's also about safety to keep any harm from safe, and it's also good for storms. When you have an ice storm or stuff like that, you don't have to worry about any down power lines. You don't have to worry about stuff like that.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, is it the school that one would be most concerned about, or it's these hospitals that are pulling people from all over the region when it comes to electricity being down?
Well, Vanderbilt, in the time that I was there, we had a reliability rate of over 99%, and most of the time it was due to things that you just can't control. One of the times was in 98 or 99, and we had one of the steam lines, the Sherindale line, was down due to maintenance. NES was working on it, and then the Edge Hill line over by the substation, they had a flock of birds that took off all at one time. It was a very humid morning, and there was just enough moisture in the air that it created an arc and shut the plant down, and we were without electricity for, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes, something like that, which was a long time.
Wow. So we've been at Vanderbilt, we've been downtown, but we have these huge tunnels, 8.5 feet, that you could walk around in under these huge institution under the middle of downtown. But there are other options, correct? Talk to me about direct bury systems and what that would change.
So direct bury is a thing they're starting to do now, and what they're doing is instead of sending the steam directly to the building, they have a heat exchanger inside the plant, and then they heat hot water to around 185 degrees, and then they send the hot water out. It goes through a heat exchanger inside the building to heat the hot water for that or use for heat, and then it comes back. It's usually 10 to 15 degree delta T, and then it comes back and it's just reheated back up. And then you can do much smaller pipes. It's direct bury with its own insulation. You don't have to have the tunnels or anything. You dig a trench, you put your direct bury line in there, and you cover it back up, and it's a much cheaper way to move things along.
So your thinking is we're probably not digging, the city is probably not digging many more tunnels to expand this thing, and direct bury will be the way to go if you want to tie in?
No, the way things have changed in the last 50 years, tunnel digging has become much more expensive, and direct bury is, well, the efficiency of only having to heat the water up a couple degrees and circulate the water is easier and cheaper.
Yeah. You know, while I have you, speaking of expensive tunnels, you probably read last week that the Nashville Business Journal reported that Elon Musk's The Boring Company was looking at tunneling from downtown to the airport, or however you want to look at it, airport to downtown. All kind of unnamed sources, and no real officials confirmed it, but it also sounded like it was more of a state-level discussion. But have city officials been looped into any such thing? Or is this something you would want for the city?
If so, I have no knowledge that the city's talking about it. But I think it'd be great. I think it'd be a good way to get people directly from the airport to downtown. We could have some of the woo girls come in. They get off the plane and they go through the tunnel and they come up on Broadway. They go to their hotels. They have their fun, and then they leave our city.
Yeah,
and it would free up some of the traffic and stuff. So I wouldn't be opposed to that at all.
Yeah, would it necessarily have to involve tunnels that already exist downtown, or I mean, I guess it's a big discussion.
No, it would have to be. It had to be its own private, separate tunnel. Started from scratch. Yeah.
So generally speaking, do you see underground as an opportunity or something you're kind of open to this idea about connecting to the airport, but does tunneling under the city also complicate things? Would you steer development away from doing more of that?
No. The only reason you would ever steer away from tunneling is just is it in your budget?
Yeah. Olivia Hill is an at-large council member, meaning elected countywide, also an engineer. Thanks for giving us a look at what's going on beneath the surface in downtown Nashville under Vanderbilt.
Well, thank you so much. And if you don't mind, reach out to me sometime. I'd love to take you a tour of the tunnel so you can see them firsthand.
I can't wait. We'll take a quick break and then zoom out a bit from downtown Nashville, get into the pipes that connect us all and make this a civilized place to call home. Stay with us.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. So we've been digging in the dirt today. We've looked at how Nashville is sinking, about 1 millimeter every year, according to new research. We've also toured the tunnels beneath downtown, beneath the campus of Vanderbilt. Now we go out to where, most of us spend our lives, which is still highly dependent on what's going on underground. How a place is even deemed civilized depends primarily on having access to things like clean water, how wastewater is transported to the right place. It is infrastructure, as boring as that word might be to you, but that's what it is. It makes life happen. And to get a view on how that infrastructure is faring, we have Lipscomb University Associate Professor of Engineering, Monica Sarton. Professor Sarton, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So first, can we quickly get to the research about Nashville sinking that we talked about top of the hour? What kind of impact does that have on underground utilities? Is that part of an explanation of why we have so many main breaks from time to time?
It definitely could be. A lot of our infrastructure is stuff that you just don't see, right? So that means it's probably underground. And if you have things like subsidence or landslides or earthquakes or any of those things could really impact either pipelines with water, pipelines with wastewater, underground utilities, stormwater movement. There's just so much. Building foundations, all of those could be impacted by subsidence events.
While I have you kind of off topic here off the top, I do. Councilmember Hill, I was asking about the feasibility of tunneling from the airport to downtown Nashville as has been proposed to some degree. Any thoughts on the feasibility of doing something like that?
I love what the councilwoman said about cost.
Yeah.
So here in Nashville, we have a lot of limestone. So really you're tunneling through stone. So whenever you're looking at engineering solutions, cost always needs to be a consideration. As the engineer, you're not usually the one paying that cost, but your client is. So you've got to get that figured out. So the comment that she made about expense for tunneling definitely has to be a part of the conversation.
And although, as we also learned when it comes to tunnels, tunneling through, you want to be in something good rock like limestone, correct? So it goes both ways?
Yeah, it could. I mean, that provides more of a structural resiliency, but just the cost of doing that. When you look at just the cost of other solutions and life cycle cost, the design, the maintenance, all of those things should come into consideration.
Can you kind of give us a view of what's going underground in a city like Nashville? I mean, maybe you take Lipscomb's campus there on the south side, kind of just outside the 440 loop. What is actually running underground in the neighborhoods into the campus at a place like that's near town?
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, so much. And with a town like Nashville that is as old as Nashville, the different types of things and where everything is, just if you had maps of underground, which of course we do have some, I think you'd be amazed at all the labyrinth of pipes and just different things that are running everywhere. So water lines are underground. Our wastewater lines are underground, and hopefully they're underground further than our water lines, because you wouldn't want a wastewater line to break and infiltrate into a water line, right? That would be bad. And then you have power lines underground. A lot of communities have put their power lines underground for a lot of the reasons that the councilwoman spoke about. And then you have, probably gas pipelines. So in the construction industry and engineering, we don't ever dig until we make sure we know what we're going to be digging into. Because digging into a power line can be incredibly dangerous and also disrupt service for people. So the same thing for like water and wastewater lines.
So putting utilities underground, I mean, I feel like in some parts of town, people will complain, why don't they put the power line, you know, every time the power goes out, why don't they put the power lines underground? I imagine there's a good reason that they haven't been in some places. What would that be?
Yeah, so there would be a couple different reasons for that. One, where's the groundwater? So if you don't want water, like if you don't want to dig down and be in water and then put infrastructure into water. So if you're looking at the elevation of groundwater, that could be a concern. And then also the cost. It does cost more to dig underground, especially when you're in limestone, to put those utilities underground. Yeah. So those are all considerations.
Was there something unique about what Google was trying to do several years ago with sort of this micro trenching? Was that to get away from the water or the rock or something? Do you know?
I don't know. Okay. I'm not familiar with what Google was trying to do.
Well,
sorry.
It's okay. Just it seemed like a story that just kept on going for quite some time. So is there any, other than the water, would there be any reason around Nashville that you wouldn't have more utilities underground? Like, would rock be prohibitive to putting, utilities underground?
Not prohibitive. No, I don't think it would be prohibitive. It would just be a consideration of the cost and if there's other solutions. One of the things, so I'm a part of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and one of the things that we always talk about is, from a life cycle, what does that look like? From a maintenance, from a what do we do when we need to take it apart in 20 years, or if it's outgrown its useful life? How do we deal with all of those things and looking at it from a whole life perspective and not a what's easiest now? What can we do right now? So those are things that we try to emphasize at Lipscomb when we're teaching. We tell our students, like, you're, as an engineer, especially a civil engineer, you're building things that are meant to last 50 years. So what that solution looks like now could be very different in 50 years.
You're saying that while it might seem nice after the storm blows through to have had the utility lines underground, once they've aged and you're having to dig up the road every few years to make a repair. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm smelling what you're stepping in. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Blake Farmer, talking with Professor Sarton from Lipscomb about underground infrastructure in Middle Tennessee. Do you have variation depending on part of Middle Tennessee by, I think of, at least in my mind, and I'm sorry, I don't know all that's underground, but if you go to the east of Nashville, I think around, Lebanon, Mount Juliet, maybe it's rockier than it is in other places. Does that change what you might put underground?
Yes. So the geology around Tennessee is very, very different from depending on where you are. So Middle Tennessee is probably pretty similar with the limestone. And again, I'm not a geotech engineer, but when you go out west, like towards Memphis, their underground is very different from what you'd encounter in Middle Tennessee. And the same if you go eastward towards East Tennessee. And then around here, and I think Mike Ziccola spoke a little about it. I heard you guys talking about, sinkholes and what happened at the Corvette Museum. Yeah. Thank you. So there's always different things that have to be evaluated when you're looking to build or construct above ground or underground. Because what's underground really determines how high you can build and how you build above ground too. So as civil engineers, specifically geotechnical, we'll do subsurface investigations to determine what it looks like underground before we start designing solutions.
Is there anything about the geology underneath, especially parts of downtown Nashville? I guess what we call downtown, sort of getting bigger. Wherever there are big buildings is what I'm at. Even in Green Hills, you have some big buildings now.
Yes.
Is there anything about what the ground can handle that determines how high you can build up?
Absolutely. So when we do a geotechnical investigation, we do certain tests in a lab to determine what the ground can support. And there's different classifications and things like that. So also it's a little different to be building right next to the Cumberland River versus, 100, 200 yards away from the Cumberland River. And all of those are considerations that we include in our design solutions.
So are there parts of even areas that are being developed big buildings proposed that this is an issue, that they actually want to build something bigger than the ground can handle?
It could be, but the exciting thing about engineering is that we want to figure those things out.
There's always a way.
Yes.
You got the budget, we'll figure it out.
Right.
Okay.
What can you afford? But no, it's also what technology do we have available,
I see.
right? So there could be a way to do almost anything if you get enough people in the room to talk about it.
Gotcha. I want to get to the report card that the American Society of Civil Engineers puts out, I guess, every few years. Maybe there's one coming this year.
So the American Society of Civil Engineers released the National Report Card earlier this year, in the spring, in March. And then we also do a report card on Tennessee's infrastructure. And I chair that committee, and we last released in 2022.
Got it.
So we're looking at getting started again for another evaluation in the next year or so.
So Tennessee got a solid C on the 22 report, C- on wastewater, C+ for drinking water, D+ for dams.
Yes.
I'm wondering if this is just kind of a reflection of our aging infrastructure, or is there more to it?
Yeah, that's definitely a consideration. We look at a lot of criteria when we're evaluating infrastructure. So current condition, capacity, age comes into future use, funding, resiliency. All of those come into determining a grade. For dams specifically, there's a lot of non-federally owned dams, like privately owned dams, that we just don't have data on. So one impact to the grades could be a lack of data. We know there are farm pond dams that are holding back water above communities where people have built homes and things like that, but we don't have information on the condition of those dams. So it's hard to give like an overall grade when we're missing information.
You know, I recall years ago doing a story, because I think it was before Metro Water here in Davidson County. I think it serves a little bit of neighboring counties too, but they were replacing some pipes that were far older than I could have imagined, like 100 years old or something.
Yes, it's crazy.
And I wonder if there's some of the utilities underground that have actually lasted longer than anyone ever thought.
Yes, if you look at like downtown Nashville, we have brick-lined pipelines, and
there's fresh water flowing through a brick pipe. Or is it wastewater or something?
Wastewater.
Okay.
The brick water, drinking water is pressurized, so
Sure. Okay.
it's usually a little different. But when you think about the age of the infrastructure, even in Nashville, those things have been here so long, and they're working. You know, they might have some cracks in them. But they're doing a pretty good job. But yes, and you think about like the dams around our country that were built after like World War II, and just the investment that the country made in infrastructure back then, and the age of those. It's a lot of things have definitely been used past their design life.
Before we wrap up the hour, I just want to ask you a big question, though we don't have a ton of time to answer it. We've been talking about what goes on underground, and obviously infrastructure of all kinds depends on what's underneath, though. And I'm thinking of unbelievable things like we saw in East Tennessee last year, with the flooding that happened in East Tennessee, Western North Carolina.
Yes.
You just don't think of like an interstate being washed away, but we learned that it can happen. So what can be done underground to make sure infrastructure can withstand whatever the climate has in store for our future?
Yeah, one of the things that engineers are really focusing on, and the American Society of Civil Engineer highlights, is a need for resiliency. So resiliency it really means, how do we recover when things happen? How do we have either redundancy in the system, or what can we do when weather events that we do not expect come through? And, a lot of our government agencies have resiliency plans. And it's just really looking at and considering now, as our weather is changing, how do we incorporate that? How do we take those different numbers, that different information, and use it in our designs now so that our designs can last into the future?
Monica Sarton is an associate professor of engineering at Lipscomb University. Thanks for joining This is Nashville.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in this hour as we go underground around Nashville. This is Nashville's a production of Nashville Public Radio. It's also a podcast that you can get wherever you like listening to podcasts. So while you're subscribing, also give Nash Villager a try. I'm a huge fan. Host Nina Cardona helps you understand Middle Tennessee history while also relating it to the headlines of the day. Somehow she finds a way to make a connection every weekday. I say Nash Villager in the morning. This is Nashville each afternoon. Today's episode was produced by Josh Deepen. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Limley. Our board operator today is Michael Pollard. The masterminds behind our theme music are LaRange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Tony Gonzalez and Caroline Eggers from the WPLN Newsroom. Conversation does not have to end here. You can comment, tell us what you want to hear on a show by leaving us a message with your phone, 615-751-2500, or find us on the socials at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.